Earlier this week, we talked about actor Robert De Niro first pushing for an anti-vaccine film produced by debunked, discredited anti-vaccine Dr. Andrew Wakefield to be screened at the Tribeca Film Festival. And then he had backpedaled once he figured out that it was totally free of any science whatsoever and that Andrew Wakefield had been debunked and discredited. So for today's classic interview, we're going to revisit when I interviewed Seth Mnookin back in February of 2011, 5 years ago. And he wrote an extensive expose of Dr. Andrew Wakefield, the financial conflicts of interest, so much of the entire embarrassing discrediting of Dr. Andrew Wakefield. We're going back to that classic interview today to refresh everybody's memory and as a sort of preview, because we're currently working with our intern and segment producer, Sam Miller, on a video about the history, origins, and sort of science or lack thereof behind the anti-vaccine movement. And this will this piggybacks nicely on the Robert De Niro story, and this will also get us ready for the anti-vaccine movement expose that we have coming up. Let's delve into it from 5 years ago, a little over 5 years ago, my interview with Seth Mnookin. Seth Mukhin is the author of The Panic Virus, also a contributing editor to Vanity Fair. Thanks for joining us, Seth.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I first saw you on Anderson Cooper, must have been now going a couple of weeks back, and you were talking a little bit about your book, but specifically it was about the Andrew Wakefield study, which incorrectly connected, I think it was 12 instances of autism with the MMR vaccine that I'm familiar with, and I assume most parents and kids are also familiar with. What do you first start looking into when you hear about this?
Well, his study actually came out in a long time ago, in 1998, and it was the study that really set off the potential or the possibility of there being a link, and I think the widespread fear of there being a link with vaccines and directly with autism. There have, for a long time, been fears about various developmental or physical injuries, in some cases relating to vaccination. But that was the first time it was directly connected to autism. And the paper was very careful about being clear that there were no actual mechanisms that they had identified. In fact, they didn't have any real evidence. This was something that was both speculative, and even the speculative part of it was based on after-the-fact recollections.
And this is 12 cases, right? Am I right about that?
Yes, 12 children that he said had been consecutively referred to him in his gastroenterology, in his capacity as a gastroenterologist. He recommended that parents not give their children the 3-in-1 measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, and that they either request single vaccines or hold off, which was really, an incredible recommendation to make, both because there was no evidence to indicate that was something that parents should do, and also because those single-dose vaccines weren't really available at the time.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but is Andrew Wakefield is a gastroenterologist, like you mentioned. Is that normally the area of medicine that would be most acquainted with vaccinations and this type of nuance?
No, not at all. No, he's not trained as a virologist. He's not trained as a pediatrician. In fact, he doesn't. Well, now since then, his doctor's license has been revoked. But no, he had no specialized training in any of the fields that would be related specifically to vaccines.
Now, when I announced that we would be talking to you, I got a lot of emails from people, and there were a few themes that were recurrent there. Number one is the idea that, hey, if people don't want to have their kids vaccinated in this way, they don't have to.
Right.
And this kind of implication that this is victimless, but it's not victimless, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we are seeing recurrent. I think in California there was, is it whooping cough?
Yes.
Death from whooping cough, which there have not been for a long time.
Yeah, one of the things that I have to say that really bothers me about this is when parents who choose not to vaccinate or to selectively vaccinate paint it in the terms that you just laid out, that this is purely an individual choice, that if you want to vaccinate your child, that is fine. That means your child's going to be protected, and you should let me do what I want with my child. I don't speak to what should or shouldn't be legislated or anything like that. I just think it's important that parents not be dishonest with themselves. And as you said, last year in California, there was a whooping cough epidemic that resulted in the deaths of 10 children. 9 of them were under 6 months old. So as that makes very clear, children who are too young to have been fully vaccinated are the ones who are at greatest risk of getting these diseases.
And can you address specifically with these 12 cases? I mean, what about them makes it not valid science? Is it that some of the, I know in a couple of the cases, the autism diagnosis actually came before the MMR vaccine?
Well, there are a couple of things, and in the now 13 years since the Wakefield study was initially published, there have been a series of revelations, including that Wakefield himself had taken out a patent for an alternate measles vaccine, a single dose or a single virus, I guess, measles vaccine that would be used if parents felt like the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine was not safe. So that's obviously a huge and clear conflict of interest. He also he was receiving money from related to a lawyer who was working with families who believed their children had been injured by vaccines, and some of the children in the study turned out to have been funneled to him through this lawyer. So there were a series of revelations in later years, and the most recent one in the British Medical Journal was accusations that he had actually doctored these children's records, so that there was outright fraud. But
so your initial one there, to be clear with my audience here, Andrew Wakefield, who put out this study and was the source of a lot of this linking that took place between the MMR vaccine and possible causing of autism, and as part of that, he recommended get individual vaccines like
Right.
the measles vaccine, and he was actually standing to make money off of people making a choice for that vaccine.
Well, potentially, if his patent, if he had been able to bring what he had taken out a patent for to market, yes,
Right.
He could make a huge amount of money. But I mean, getting back to what you were asking about, and I think you were sort of getting to when you talked about this is 12 children, is one of my really big issues with the way that this was covered and the way that set of fears kind of permeated our culture is that a 12-child case study is never the type of thing that you would make a recommendation off of.
Well, it brings up this other thought, which you address a little bit in the book, and this is the idea that on many media outlets, all points are equally valid. There is
Right.
this idea that to be balanced, you have to give all points a fair view. And my particular politics will come to light here. This is why the Obama isn't an American thing, is now even considered valid in any significant portion of the population. Gay marriage and gays in the military are considered a valid debate in this country. They aren't in other countries. And how much of it do you think comes from this idea that all sides have to be given equal time or equal value?
Well, I mean, let me first address the issues that you raised with gay marriage and with the birther issue, because I actually think those are two really interesting examples. In my view, regardless of your political orientation, the question of whether or not Obama was born in the United States, I think, is a ridiculous one, and the fact that became a topic of discussion on TV and received actual coverage was, to me, a prime example of exactly what you're talking about, which is this kind of BS notion that everything needs to be through this on the one hand, on the other hand lens, even when you're dealing with issues of fact. If you were covering a football game and one team won, you would never say, so and so claimed that the Steelers are going to the Super Bowl. You would say the Steelers won the Super Bowl, regardless if some crazy person in the corner was insisting that actually the Bears won the game.
Right.
So that was my problem with the way that the birther issue is covered. I think that there are situations in which it is more legitimate to have, and some people feel this and some people feel this.
Sure.
And the abortion debate is something that I use as an example. Personally, I am pro-choice, but I think that people can have legitimate differences of opinion about the ethical and moral implications of abortion. So
Sure.
in that situation, I think it's very appropriate for a reporter to do everything he or she can to present both sides fairly and accurately. This is, the vaccine issue is, I think, something more akin to the birther issue because, and you've seen this even recently in the past month or so when these latest fraud revelations have come out about Wakefield. The discussion has been, autism study or study relating vaccines to autism debunked, and then we'll have Andrew Wakefield on here defending his study and saying, yes, it's true, and someone from the CDC saying, no, it's not true.
Right.
And I just think that's irresponsible. I mean, I think that's ridiculous.
This goes, we could even take this a step further, which is we had a discussion about just generally the conspiracy theory and whether the birther thing is a conspiracy theory or not. I'm not here to classify them.
Right.
But many times when you hear about a conspiracy theory, it's almost like there's a different standard for the burden of proof that doesn't exist anywhere else. So in other words, here's a conspiracy theory about 9/11 or about Paul McCartney having died in the 60s or whatever. And if you can't prove to me that it's not true, then it's probably I believe that it's true. It's almost like the burden of proof is reversed in some cases.
Well, but there are 2 points. I mean, one, I think that it's interesting, and to me, it can be hard to figure out where the media, and I hesitate to use the term sort of media as if that's a monolithic entity because clearly it isn't. But I think the general point holds. To where the media decides, okay, well, this is worthy of coverage. I mean, there are people who believe that the Earth is flat, but you don't see in the paper a discussion of that or an article saying so-and-so claims the Earth is flat. And,
right.
So, but for some reason and same with Paul McCartney. I mean, I think most people no longer. It's pretty commonly accepted that he was not replaced by a lookalike after he drove his car off a cliff in 1966 or whatever it was. But then there are some things that do, for whatever reason, end up getting that sort of treatment. I think a lot of it. Or not a lot of it, but you see that come up a lot in relationship to medicine and science. And this is what I wanted to say. When you're talking about the switched burden of proof, the problem with that is you can't prove a negative in the way that those conspiracies often would ask you to.
Absolutely.
So there's no way to prove that Paul McCartney was not switched out. I mean, I guess you could do a DNA test or something, but
that might be a fraud too.
Without having him donate tissue samples.
Sure, and even that DNA test could be a fraud. I mean, if it really is a conspiracy, I'm sure he could set that up.
But I mean, so in the same way, there's no way to prove a 9/11 conspiracy is not true.
Mm-hmm.
Just like there's no way to prove that tomorrow I won't be able to fly. All you can say is all the evidence points to human beings not being able to fly because there's no documented case of it ever having occurred. So that's what in the topic of vaccines and autism, that's what you get a lot, and you get people who are proponents of the notion that there's a connection, saying, "Well, can you guarantee that there's not?" And you can't. That's not a guarantee you can offer ever in science. All you can say is, we've looked at millions and millions of cases, dozens of studies have been done by hundreds of scientists, and we have never found a link.
We've been speaking with Seth Mnookin. The book is The Panic Virus. He is also the contributing editor to Vanity Fair. Seth, thanks so much for doing this.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.